Continuous rebellion seems to be the fate of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Since April this year, events have escalated, with M23 rebels taking up arms and accusing the Congolese government of violating the peace deal. Attempts at making peace have failed, and Africa's largest UN peacekeeping force seems to have no influence. However, the International Criminal Court has perhaps inadvertently helped to escalate the situation by calling for the capture of a rebel leader known as the Terminator. After 10 years of suffering, what will it take to terminate this conflict? This week, Africa Today focuses on the deadly and sometimes dubious attempts to control the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
The UN peacekeeping mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo is the organization's largest and costliest, but yet has been dubbed the most ineffectual peacekeeping in history. It is estimated to cost the UN over $1 billion a year to run the peacekeeping mission in DR Congo. So far, it has been criticized by both regional experts and some governments of failing to deal with rebel forces and prevent human atrocities against civilians by M23 rebels. The rebels, who are withdrawing from Goma, the frontier city they captured without confrontation from the UN, are believed to be funded by President Paul Kagame's government in Rwanda. Though Rwanda has denied funding the M23 activities in eastern Congo, a UN report has found strong evidence of Kigali's involvement to destabilize the Congolese government. Both the Congolese government and M23 are fighting for control of mineral wealth in areas including North Kivu province, where Goma is located. New evidence uncovered by a British news organization has revealed Rwanda's support to destabilize DR Congo may be widespread. A couple of ex-soldiers told a reporter how Rwanda has offered to fund a new front further south. With this conflict showing no end, Africa Today examines how significant is the control of DR Congo for either Kinshasa's government or rebel forces.
The peace deal agreed in 2003 might seem like an ironic dream 10 years later. I'm Vuiswang Ngobongwana, welcoming you to Africa Today. Of course, the war has an economic as well as a political side, as you've just heard. Fighting is fueled by the country's vast mineral wealth, with all sides taking advantage of this anarchy to plunder those natural resources. The hope of independence in 1960 was destroyed with the assassination of the Congo's first post-colonial independent leader, Patrice Lumumba. He was replaced with a puppet military leader called Mbaluto, who made the Congo friendly to the West. It's the painfully familiar dynamic of military and politics playing out for control of immense natural resources. This week, we are focusing on where the African-led solutions will come from. And here with me to discuss this conundrum are Julius Mbaluto, who's a broadcaster and a political analyst, Vava Tampa, the director of Save the Congo, and on the line from Kampala in Uganda, we're joined by Tabu Butagira, who's a senior reporter with Daily Monitor. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. And if we could start on the homeland with you there, Tabu. You are there in Uganda, and we heard today that the British are removing the 21 million in aid for Rwanda. From your perspective, how has that news been received in Uganda, and what are your observations on the military movements that are happening in your country?
Let me start by pointing out the issue of Rwanda's alleged involvement, which it has denied quite strenuously. Yes, the news of Rwanda has reacted very angrily to the freezing of aid by UK. The Foreign Affairs Minister, Liz Mushikiwabo, just issued a statement in which she said the attempts to freeze aid were aimed at blackmailing Rwanda because Kigali, according to her, has no hand at all in influencing events in eastern Congo, and therefore the action by the Western government is just throwing a possible solution further offhand. Well, in Kampala, I mean, there isn't as much talk in terms of whether Rwanda is involved or not. As you remember, the UN group of experts report had also implicated some Ugandan officials, including naming the president's brother, General Salim Saleh. So Uganda has its own fire to fight, if you like, in this case. But most importantly, Uganda is the chair of the International Great Lakes region, which is a regional bloc of 11 countries here, including the Democratic Republic of Congo. So in that capacity, President Museveni is the chair of that regional body. And it has been meeting in Kampala over the last 3 or 2 months. And for the 5th time, they had the last meeting on 24th, which is where they gave the ultimatum to M23 to withdraw from Goma. Now, what I do understand from behind the scenes discussions among the heads of government and state is that Uganda gave an ultimatum for M23 to leave Goma. In the event of failing, President Museveni had pledged, I am told, if President Kabila of DRC had agreed, that the Ugandan army, the UPDF, would go in and disperse M23 rebels if they hang on to Goma. So precisely that is the state of affairs as far as Uganda's involvement is concerned. And I think it's geared more towards trying to find a solution because Uganda is in an odd position. You remember that in the 1997 to 2003 Congo War, Uganda was accused of plundering Congo's resources. And in 2005, the International Court of Justice did rule that, yes, Uganda was guilty and fined it $10 billion, which hasn't been paid. So it is in the interest of Uganda to try to redeem itself precisely in the face of the international community and also to the political equations of the region.
Okay, thank you for that really comprehensive update on the situation. Julius, from your perspective, you've just heard there what Thabo was saying. I mean, do you think that the removal of this 21 million in aid ultimately will have the right kind of impact? It seems to be, from what Thabo is saying.
Sometimes we think about African government in a very basic way, but it's a bit more complex than we see. Removing aid of whatever millions of pounds, that's more change to politicians. Money doesn't really make African leaders move. Look at the initiative by Mo Ibrahim to reward the best rulers of the continent, but yet that never moved any president to act better. So you're talking of a country again with lots of resources. So, and then looking east to China, other countries that can fund it. Withholding aid doesn't really make them move.
Really?
From my perspective.
What are your thoughts, Vava?
I completely disagree. Rwanda has no resources whatsoever. The only thing Rwanda exports is banana and perhaps some coffee. So in terms of resources, Rwanda is an incredibly poor country. Now, the UK has been giving £37 million directly to the Rwandan government for the past 10 or so years. And the problem now is the UK has no control on where Rwanda invests or uses that money. And there has been allegations that Kigali has been using some of this money to fund a murderous militia gang in Congo. And Kagame, the Kagame regime, essentially relies on 50% of the Kagame regime budget. It comes from the international community. So the money has a massive implication, and Britain is the largest European aid donor to the Kigali government. So this would send a powerful message on the ground. And we also believe Germans already removed aid, and the Netherlands, and so forth. So there will be few other governments who would follow suit.
Right, but ultimately what we're talking about is these wonderful natural resources that everyone keeps raising as the main catalytic motivator for this mess. Well, is it that simplistic?
Well, I tell you, certainly one of the key elements, one of the central reasons why Kagame and Museveni has been essentially funding militia gangs in Congo is to essentially control Congo's natural resources. Congo has incredible wealth, more diamonds, more gold than any other country in Africa. And with a very weak central government, essentially the eastern side of Congo has been left at the mercy of dictatorial regime in Kigali and Kampala. And that has been a central element. I mean, Rwanda, for instance, now, Rwanda exports coltan, and Rwanda has no coltan. And we ask ourselves, where are they getting it from?
Coltan
Uganda. Coltan essentially is a mineral which is used to make mobile phones and so forth. And Uganda exports gold in the world, and Uganda has no gold. Uganda has been the first number one in Central Africa in exporting gold, but Uganda has no gold. And where are they getting it from?
Can I say
Congo?
Can I say something? I agree with you when any particular funding is withheld. But if you look into the case of Zimbabwe, even sanctions never worked. Zimbabwe is still surviving. What I'm talking about is the political will to solve the problem. And when you talk about even withholding aid, remember there is interconnectedness between the Western countries and the resources in Congo. Don't even talk about Rwanda, Uganda.
So
it's more complex.
How about, let me just bring Tabu in on the discussion there. It seems that ultimately, whatever the motivation of Britain is in stopping the aid, and it seems like they did it quite reluctantly and took their time about it, ultimately what we're talking about is the exploitation of this mineral wealth. And the primary concern doesn't seem to be the well-being of the people in the Congo, but perhaps even affecting a certain level of stability so that business can continue as usual.
Frankly, first let me just make a quick correction. The gentleman was saying that there's no gold in Uganda. That's not correct. There's gold deposits, for instance, in Karamoja, which is northeast of Uganda. But that does not preclude the fact that some individuals could be involved in smuggling gold or doing legitimate trade with the Congo in order to increase the stocks of exports from here. Two, Congo is a confluence of varied interests. Very many Western companies involved. China, if you remember correctly, have entered into an agreement with the Kabila government to exploit the resources of Congo in exchange for construction of infrastructure, mainly roads in all the 11 provinces. So if you ask about the competition of interest in Congo, it's not just a dominance of countries in the region. In fact, if you like, the politics of Congo, from way before even Emery, who was assassinated, the first prime minister of Congo, and then moving on to Kabila and Mobutu Sese Seko, Mobutu Sese Seko for a very long time was propped up in government by the United States, for instance, not by an African government. So clearly, yes, there are so many rival interests in Eastern Congo. Congo is a very rich country, but it has very loose government, if you like, or very diminished state authority in the eastern part.
Right.
And that is poor infrastructure. And therefore, a combination of all these factors makes Congo like Eastern Congo like no man's land.
Yes.
For instance, when the M23 were advancing on Goma, the soldiers simply retreated and they ran away. And the next day, they reported to a stadium publicly to hand over their guns to the rebels. No state army would be doing something like that. So there's something significantly wrong with Eastern Congo in as far as the influence or presence of state authority is. And that kind of vacuum has given people opportunity to go and try to exploit whatever they can get of Congo's resources.
Okay,
the other point I wanted to put, the other point I wanted to raise immediately is that the diminished state authority has allowed the rise of militia groups who only make control over territories where they can do exploitation, and therefore they trade in that in exchange for guns and ammunition, and that has allowed insecurity to thrive in Eastern Congo.
Okay, well, thank you for that. We're going to be looking more at African-orientated solutions or more African involvement in this situation, because all we seem to be talking about is the consequences, and that seems to be African deaths, Africans shooting other Africans. So as we move forward, let's consider that. But before we get to that, we have your point of view, dear viewer, on this perpetual conflict in the Congo. On our Facebook fan page, Mavoka in the Democratic Republic of the Congo says, "My country needs help, and all the world can think about is our resources. People are dying in masses." Via email from Nigeria, we have some thoughts from Abdullahi, who says that to give peace a chance, one has to back down for the other. In other words, some kind of compromise. And he says, "I think it's a good step now that the M23 are withdrawing." And via text, harking back to the topic we discussed last week about how to cure racism within South Africa, Nepius in Zimbabwe says, "South Africa has got freedom, but not independence. Zimbabwe style is the best solution for economic empowerment." Well, some interesting thoughts there. Let us know where you fit into that spectrum by emailing africa@presstv.co.uk, or you can text +44 78 0000 8086. And of course, our ever-growing Facebook fan page is Africa Today, Press TV in London. If I could bring you in, Vava, we're looking at solutions or potential solutions here. We've already outlined a very familiar dynamic on the African continent where a kind of neo-colonial setup exists, and then you have bordering countries fighting based on ethnic differences, which are being fueled by who knows who. It's you could almost despair, you know. But from your perspective, as you look at this situation, can you see any slivers of hope with the involvement of organizations like the African Union that can, or existing bodies like ECOWAS, etc., that can actually have some kind of an impact in the situation?
No, I definitely, we are definitely calling up on the SADC, the Southern African Community Development.
There's SADC, there's ECOWAS,
indeed,
there are many bodies.
To actually get involved, and perhaps more importantly, we actually want South Africa to take the lead, because 10 years ago, we were essentially at the very same place, and South Africa took the lead, and that led into this signing of the peace deal in Sun City in South Africa under Thabo Mbeki, which essentially saw Rwanda and Uganda withdrawing their troops from Congo, and all the militia gang essentially, sort of stopping their campaign of killings people and so forth. So South Africa perhaps needing to step into the plate, but sadly South Africa has remained reluctant under Zuma.
What are your thoughts there? Why do you feel Zuma is so reluctant to get involved in the situation? Is it that his plate is too full at home?
I think definitely South Africa has got a lot more to chew than it bites. The issue about ANC splitting and the issue of Julius Malema and all. But I think also the key thing to get solution in Congo will actually be drawn from his complicated history, and also the involvement of the Western countries in Congo. Western countries have to be honest. And
what's
also,
the likelihood of that when you're talking
as in
about
terms
money?
As in terms of even, because at the end of the day, when you look into East Africa, now we are talking about Museveni being the head of Great Lake Regions movement. You know, when you look about 11 countries, that's a lot of countries. Now, Uganda is implicated in the conflict. Rwanda is. So, within the region, is it going to have independent mind to seek a solution? Then when you go to Rwanda, of course you have Kagame denying. But I'll tell you one thing. Last time there was an agreement between Paul Kabila, Museveni and Kagame. Is the time when we saw them go to North Kivu, the arrest of Lauren Kunda, and therefore there was fairly a good amount of peace until Bosco Ntaganda came into the picture.
Lauren Kunda has never been arrested. Essentially, he's been placed into a house, some sort of house arrest. But look, essentially, the central problem here, one of the reasons why Congo remains unstable is the crisis of leadership in Congo.
But what do you think? Is that why it's so easy for groups like the ICC to get involved? And it seemed, as we mentioned earlier in the introduction, seemingly inadvertently have given more power to M23.
Well, that's the issue we have. The crisis of leadership has essentially created a vacuum of power. So the M23 can do whatever they want to do because the central government, the Kabila government, has failed. Equally, Uganda and Rwanda can essentially come in and do whatever they want to do because of that crisis of leadership. So that is the first thing we need to sort out. Kabila need to be sorted out. That's the first element.
Can I just talk about the...
Well, let's bring Tabu just before you come in there, Julius. I mean, that comment we were making about the International Criminal Court getting heavily involved and seeking the head or the capture of a rebel leader has given more impetus to the situation. I mean, why do African countries, do you think, give more credence to what the ICC is attempting to do than perhaps talking amongst themselves? Are we simply talking about a legacy of self-esteem to do with neocolonialism? What's going on there? What is your thoughts on the role of the ICC?
Sorry, I got disconnected in part of the discussion, so I lost quite a significant bit of information. But I'll respond like this. The ICC, if you like, is the most incompetent of institutions around, other than just making threats. There are a number of people that have been indicted by the ICC for which they've issued an arrest warrant. ICC doesn't have a police force or another unit to effect each arrest warrant. Joseph Kony of Lord's Resistance Army is at large. He had the warrant of arrest for himself. President Bashir of Sudan is moving around the world in spite of arrest warrant for it. So the understanding about the ICC is, whereas it comes in handy to try to draw international attention to resolving conflicts, especially in Africa, there is the perception that it lacks a proper understanding and context of conflicts here and has no mechanism of enforcing even its own rules. So therefore, the thing is that since the M23, following their mutiny in April this year, have sort of some kind of leadership, it is more important to engage those leaders and deal with them and resolve the political questions and then pursue the matter of justice for any offenses committed in the process of the war later.
And also it begs the question, Julius, if the ICC seems to have a sort of strategic misunderstanding about the dynamics in the Congo, how are they equipped to actually make judgments on these people who are captured? But anyway, as we're closing the discussion, what are your thoughts on how this all fits in together towards, as we point towards some kind of solution?
I'll say this quickly.
Yeah.
Number one, you cannot blame Rwanda and Congo without thinking about the history of Congo. Because at the outset, independence, you have Mbaluto taking over through military coup, and then quickly you come into a vacuum, power vacuum during his leadership. Therefore, Rwanda, Uganda comes in. We can't forget that. Then when you come up, you find out complications of other countries in East Africa coming in, Congo, and also Zimbabwe, Angola from the south. When you look at all that, you have to think about leadership in the context of Africa itself and also international community. Mbaluto was a puppet of the West, not Africa, West. So why was that the case?
Yes.
Now come to currently the key players, as in Rwanda and Uganda. How do we solve that?
Okay, well, I'm going to give the last word to Vava there.
Again, no one is trying to defend Mbaluto. I am the first who would actually, put Mbaluto on the cross. Now, the problem here is I want, as an African, in the future years to come to live at peace in Africa or across the world. And what this conflict has done is that it's created a massive conflict between the Congolese and the Rwandan, whether Hutus or Tutsis, because we have both Rwandan who have come, both Hutus and Tutsis who've come in their thousands into Congo to kill, rape and loot, and have left millions of people killed, dead. It has created the same problem between the Congolese and the Ugandan. And what needs to be done is, first, we need to hold our leaders, the Rwandan leaders and the Ugandan, accountable for their crimes. And secondly, the leadership in Congo needs to be addressed. It has to be dealt with. And then we'll see some sort of changes on the ground.
Right. Well, that, I'm afraid, is all the time that we have. How will leadership be held accountable in any African nation, but particularly in this tragic situation? The Congo is big enough to encapsulate the whole of Europe, so you can imagine what's at stake. Thank you to all of you who've been sending comments to us. Email africa@presstv.co.uk, or if you prefer, text +4478 0000 8086. Messages are charged at your local operator rates, don't forget. Thanks to today's guests, very informative, from Julius Mbaluto, Vava Tampa, and on the phone from Kampala in Uganda, Tabu Butagira. Thank you so much. Join us next week for another edition of Africa Today. But until then, from me, Vuiswa Ngobongwana, on behalf of the whole team, thanks for watching.